Looking for a House of the Dragon video.
Yes, there's been a horde of you. Well, you won't find your
House of the Dragon video.
dear.
House of the Dragon Season 3 Episode 5 is here, and it's another mostly solid episode. A slow one, a little less focused than some of the others, and there is one particular thing about this episode I hated. We will mention that later. But generally, we can feel the walls closing in here, the knives drawing, the screws tightening, Rhaenyra's mistakes continuing to haunt her, and the last episode I talked about how desperate she's been for people she can trust. It's part of why she kept going back to Alicent and why she chose to keep Orwyle on her council. So many wounds in the past that have left her both wary to trust anyone, but at the same time very desperate to. And now it seems the two closest allies she has in Daemon and Mysaria are both going to be lying to her, or withholding information at the least. I'm a little confused by this Alicent escape plot, but it seems like if anyone is going to open the wall for her, it will be Mysaria. And if Rhaenyra found that out, same as if she found out Daemon lied about Sheep Stealer's rider, it may just push her over the edge. I think we're also starting to see a bit of a trend from Rhaenyra's perspective. This isn't quite the reality, but as she sees it, she shows people kindness only for them to take advantage or throw it back in her face. She was gracious to Ormond and his men only for them to seize Tumbleton. She promised to look after Darragh only for it to be a trick. She promised to be kind to Alicent and Helaena only for them to potentially escape here. She brought food to the people only for them to slander her name and murder her city watch. Again, this isn't the full picture, but I think from Rhaenyra's perspective, she is increasingly going to see it that way, to conclude, well, if this is how you repay my kindness, I will give you no more of it. But I'm getting carried away. I think this is continuing to be effective this season, seeing this slow build of things tightening against Rhaenyra. There's a lot we need to discuss this episode though, and principally, I want to say this episode made me notice a deeper layer to the story that I'm not sure a lot of the audience understand. I have been aware of it before, but this is the first time I've kind of consciously reflected on it, and I think it's worth some proper discussion as a result, so if that interests you, check out this cool train. In fact, actually, can I start by mentioning Criston Cole? The guy's barely had any screen time this season, but there is a whole subplot going on here that seems destined to end for him in disaster very, very soon. Criston has been attempting to fight an army that has outnumbered and even finally outpaced him in this episode. Gwaine, of course, is seeing things increasingly forlorn here, but as Criston told us last episode, it's different for Gwaine. He is a high tower, he is a lord and doesn't need to carve out a name for himself in the service of others. Criston wants a shot at greatness now, even if that means certain death. He wants to go out in a blaze of glory, cutting down as many men as he can before heroically succumbing to a tragic end worthy of song. A song that will be sung before Alicent specifically, and she will weep for her former lover, and Criston will live on forever in legend. I like the naivety of that. I find that fun. And the thing is, Criston's style of fighting has been anything but glorious or honourable. This is guerrilla warfare and killing people in their sleep and all sorts of stuff that's not considered honourable by Westerosi standards. He told us last week the fighting won't be clean, but it will be pure, which just seems an excuse to justify this shot at greatness, because is it pure? Is he on the right side of righteousness as he keeps arguing he is? I suppose maybe you could say Aegon is the rightful king, but that seems a matter of great debate, so I don't think this is the chance for glory Criston is imagining. And secondly, how many innocent, good, ordinary men will he lead into slaughter with him as a result? How many people will he needlessly get killed for no tactical benefits, no hope of victory, and no hope of anything beyond maybe a song he's unlikely to get, but they're not going to get anything there. I enjoy how cheap and weak his speech at the end of this episode feels. I don't see much greatness there. I see vanity and foolishness. You know, I just got back from watching The Odyssey, a film which opens with a bard telling us the glorious story of Agamemnon's triumph over Troy, before much later into the story we cut back and see that war from inside, with all the glory stripped away in place of this being a cruel trick that violated the sacred law of Zeus and cost so many people their lives, burned an entire city to the ground, all for one man's ambition who didn't benefit from it anyway. This show has often, a little too forcefully, laboured the idea of the highborn playing with the innocent lives of small folk, but it's nice to also see the idea of glory itself being ridiculed here, because whilst it's been obvious to us from the start that this story is a tragedy, the people within it don't know that, haven't yet realised it, think there's something great to be gained from what will go down in history as a sorry and sordid affair. We don't generally think of the present day with that kind of perspective, with the kind of foresight about how it's going to be remembered, if this is a tragedy, if this is the gyre widening. And I actually think that itself is something really interesting to consider, not just about this show, but about our lives in general, about what this point in history will mean. You know, maybe I'm wrong because I haven't finished the book. I've read as far as to the start of this season, and then I stopped, and I'm going to read the rest after this season and make a big video comparing the two. So maybe I've misjudged the trajectory of the book, but I don't think anyone's going to come out of this a hero, a celebrated champion. This is a story of everybody sacrificing everything for absolutely nothing lasting or concrete in return. So I really like what they've done with Criston this season, in a very short and economical load of scenes, but it's not my favourite thing this episode, it's not the biggest thing. I want to discuss that next.
Trust in your queen, and I pledge you, you will
Get 51% off World Anvil!
You will be the first!
World Anvil! Yep, they are sponsoring this video. World Anvil is an online tool for game masters, for writers, for tabletop RPG players and world builders. An online tool for designing worlds, creating characters, chronicling history, planning and managing campaigns from a plethora of different games. My best friend uses it for our D&D campaign, I use it for planning my novel. Far better and easier than the scraps of random A4 paper stuffed into a drawer that used to constitute my creative process. Not only can I keep everything in one place where I can easily edit anything I want to, but I can create timelines, hyperlinks branching off to specific characters or articles, family trees, a billion other things. You can even link them all to maps, like here's this basic map I made years ago. If I click on the character Tess, it sends me straight to her page where everything is redacted, and that's like the most basic thing you can do with your maps. There's other creators whose world building looks so much nicer than mine. There's a whole community network on World Anvil if that's your thing. There's so many different cool features for everything you may possibly need. In general, there's been lots of great updates recently, making the interface even simpler and smoother than it already was. World Anvil is great. I am genuinely passionate. I hope you can hear that. And if you desire, if you crave, if you call to the heavens for a 51% discount, then use the code TREE, or click the link in the description or the pinned comment. And if you just want to try out the free version, then go for it. There's no time limit. Test it out for as long as you want. World Anvil. Let me start with some context. Last video I talked about the fact there's a large portion of the audience who criticised the hell out of this show for its portrayal of Rhaenyra, arguing the show tries to paint her as some benevolent, flawless, great queen, and the writing is then stupid because all of her actions are stupid and therefore their attempts to paint her as someone brilliant falls flat. And so I argued that is not the intention at all, that concluding Rhaenyra is a character we're supposed to see as great thoroughly misunderstands the show. She's always been very flawed, her actions, especially this season, have been incredibly flawed, and that is deliberate. Things are supposed to be going wrong, and indeed, I think this is true for almost every character. I can't think of a single person who has made non-stop smart decisions at every turn in this story, because this is a tragedy about the fall of the House of Dragons. Tragedies don't work if everyone makes smart decisions. Whilst similar to Game of Thrones in a lot of ways, this is not a story of chess grandmasters outwitting each other at every turn. It is a tragedy of powerful people being very stupid and very human and very flawed. But then I got a lot of responses on that video in a comment saying, yes, that's all very well, but it doesn't counteract the very green versus black framing of this show that has consistently painted the blacks as better people. If not the good side, then the gooder side. And it's true they did go with that as a marketing trick. Which side are you going to pick, the green or the blacks? Which was a clever marketing move. However, I don't think it's a fair reflection of the actual show itself. I mean, call me naive, but I don't agree with this. I think Alicent and Rhaenyra have both done bad things, both been a similar degree of mostly well-meaning people attempting to navigate a positive outcome from a political world they don't fully understand. Daemon is more charismatic than Aemond, but is he a better person? Is he perhaps just a bit older and wiser as a result of his age? Jace and Lucerys are certainly less villainous than Ormond, less cruel than Aegon, but Darragh and Grain. Tylands has always been a character I've sympathised with all while. I mean, look, I'm not trying to say you can't make that argument. I'm not saying it's totally invalid, because there is some evidence. You can see gaps in what I'm saying there. Missaria, I think we are meant to empathise with, for example, even though I've always found her very bland. But I think principally this kind of sniping and drawing up sides misses the point. It's exactly the same mess all of these characters get drawn into. The show does put in a lot of work to make us empathise with Rhaenyra, but I think that's quite obvious why, when her story is going to end with her committing atrocities and becoming quite dark. I mean, I don't know that for a fact, but I'm fairly sure that's where this has been going for quite a while now. I mean, have you noticed how much she keeps talking about revenge recently? You can't make a story about the ways cultural and political pressures can push people to an extreme if you straight up paint her as a villain from the very beginning. We would lose the greatest layer of tragedy here, that this isn't all about glory and power and ambition and people being awful, cruel people. There are still people in this game who have at least tried somewhat to think of the realm and think of the people. They just also completely lost their way in the process and never fully understood it anyway, and have all sorts of other impulses that get drawn to the surface. Of course, we're supposed to empathise with Rhaenyra. The whole kind of trajectory of this story wouldn't work if we didn't, but it doesn't mean she's supposed to be seen as all good and the Greens as all bad. There's just no way that's simplistic. One person I think the story does paint as unequivocally good, however, is Helaena. I love Helaena, I won't hear a bad word said against her. I really like this sequence to do with Moon Tea, because whilst I can understand the pragmatism of what Alicent's saying, just take a second to remember what your daughter went through. Two men came and not just murdered one of her children, but forced her to pick between them. Helaena was made to feel as though she murdered one of them. And whilst I'm not equating taking Moon Tea with murder at all, I am pro-abortion, I'm a children's therapist, I've too readily seen the result of parents stuck with children they didn't want to have, don't have the emotional capacity to manage, and aren't given any support for. I'm not saying that, but from Helena's perspective, how is it going to feel being told to drink Moon Tea? I completely understand why she'd want another child, and why she'd want to do anything to raise it in safety and happiness, just as I can understand why she does not want to leave Jaheira. I really feel for Helaena in this situation. I really like this plot beat. It means Helaena finally gets some space to be explored as a character again, and in a way, I can't think of anything more awful here than being someone as good-natured as Helaena, born not just into this family, but into this political minefield where all she wants to do is look after the children she has. To just have this at the core of the story is wonderful and awful, and just adds an extra layer of misery to all of the mess, because I'm almost certain it won't end well for her. Perhaps that's also the point. The culture and society that's been constructed here is such a systemic hellscape that you can't simply raise a child in uncomplicated happiness and safety. I think this was a pretty solid setup episode, even if it's off the back of a previous setup episode, and even if I'm concerned by the lack of episodes left. I'm happy to see things with Aegon finally progressing just a little. I'm happy to see Aemond again. The two criticisms I have that are worth mentioning, I mean there's probably others I could make, but the ones I want to mention are firstly Salouf for saying the phrase, "It's been a minute."
It's been a minute.
At the best of times, that's one of the two American idioms I despise, alongside saying I could care less, to in fact mean I couldn't care less.
If you could care less about something, then all you're telling us is that you do care at least a little bit. Because you could care less.
But to hear it in a medieval fantasy setting here really pulls me out of it. Just feels like a little bit of sloppiness in the dialogue. We've seen a lot of clunky dialogue this season, and this just feels like a great example to summarise all of it. But more importantly, my big criticism is the fact there's another SA scene, another attempted assault on another woman. It's happened in 4 of the 5 episodes this season so far, and only one of those scenes actually had any vague purpose. So can they stop doing this? I'm starting to question the writers as people now, especially when, on the flip side, there was a scene with Aegon where he has to lick a person's shoe, and that was too gratuitous to dare show us. They cut away from that, just leave us with the implications, but assaulting a woman, no, let's keep playing that up as much as possible. Again, the fact it doesn't actually happen only marginally improves things, because there's always this implication that assuming the men get stopped, it therefore doesn't matter. It's all fine, and the women are unaffected affected by this ordeal and we can just move on, and that's not true in reality, and scenes like this normalise the idea that it's fine so long as they got away, and I really don't like that. In the past I've always praised House of the Dragon for not being as kind of gratuitous and over the top as David and Dan were at their worst in Game of Thrones, but I don't feel that's the case anymore. Anyway, a pretty decent episode overall. It's not since season 1 that I've been oozing with praise for this show, but I'm still enjoying it. It's mostly good where it matters. I personally don't care Ormond's Valyrian steel blade doesn't cut through a thick wooden table, but if you do care about that kind of thing, let me know your thoughts, good or bad. Let me know your thoughts in general. Like the video if you liked it. Subscribe, maybe support me on Patreon or buy me a coffee, but otherwise, hopefully see you next time. And as ever, a special thank you goes to Flying Spider, Luke Gore, Michael Gallagher, Emery, Faithy, DQM, Kinesthetic, Maury, Sebastian, Alicia, Chad Bramwell and Joshua C. Follier. Thank you.